Summer 1996, a dejected Todd Gill speaks to Toronto media. After all the rumors I've heard over the years, it's finally happened. I can't say I didn't see changes coming, but it's still a shock. Gill, a heart and soul defenseman, was the longest tenured Toronto Maple Leaf until about 20 minutes ago. He'd been teammates with everyone from Borje Salming to Dmitry Yushkevich. He's headed to the San Jose Sharks, a flailing expansion team where he will become their new captain. I don't know how to feel. Not being a Maple Leaf anymore hurts. I thought I could still help this team. My dream was to win a Stanley Cup as a Leaf. Now that will never happen. That's sad, but I can't dwell on it. Coming to Toronto in return is center Jamie Baker, a solid third-line guy, certainly a need for the Leafs, but losing Gill hurts. It's like a baby Wendell trade. Except I'm certain Todd won't be back like Wendell. Oh, sweet Wendell. We'll never do it again, we promise. Despite the Leafs' status as a fiscal titan, they added a lot of salary at the 1996 deadline. GM Cliff Fletcher needs to do some hacking to the payroll. He's been commanded to by the board and new minority owner Larry Tenenbaum. I mean, how else are they going to afford to raise ticket prices? Wait. At the draft, Fletcher looks around at his Millionaires Club and picks the pieces he needs the least. He has no leverage, so he won't get fair value for anyone, but he does what he can. Mike Gartner, who is old but fresh off 35 goals, is sent to Phoenix with salary retention for a measly 4th-round pick. Gartner will later call a press conference saying a verbal no-trade clause was violated, and Fletcher will call him a liar. Great look. The Gartner disposal is an easier sell than you might expect, as the Leafs' 10th-round pick from 1994, European League superstar Sergei Berezin, is coming across the Atlantic. Soon to be 25, Berezin is expected to be an immediate impact player for Toronto, fresh off a 49-goal in 45-game season in the German DEL, outpacing proven 40-scoring NHLer Robert Reichel. Not that Berezin will burst in and score 40, but he'll be a legitimate player right off the drop. Dave Gagne, who despite having 22 points in 28 games in the blue and white, is seen as a disappointment/unnecessary add by many and was non-existent in the playoffs. There's only room for one of him or Muller as the second-line center behind Doug Gilmour, and that's already keeping natural center Mats Sundin on the wing. Muller had big goals in the playoffs, so he's the one who gets to stay. Gagne is sent to Calgary with salary retention for a measly 3rd-round pick. The Leafs shed money. Yippee. They get nothing back. In typical Fletcher fashion, the players drafted on draft day are a bit of an afterthought, but let's run through them since the Leafs had 1,000 picks despite not having their own first. Marek Postmek, big Czech defenseman, Leafs had him ranked 9th internally, they got him at 36. Francis Larrivée, a goalie that fights, is the other second-rounder. Then, rapid fire, Mike Lankshire, Konstantin Kalmykov, Jason Sessa, Vladimir Antipov, Peter Kava, Brandon Sugden, Dmitry Yakushin, Chris Borges, Lucio DiMartinis, Reggie Berg, Thomas Caberlet, and Jared Hope. The Leafs picked 14 guys. Surely, a couple of them will pan out. A couple being at least 2. Bob McKenzie in the Toronto Star, who is almost always spot on about where this team is heading, says things are likely to get worse before they get better in Toronto. I mean, look at the team. They were worse than mid in 1996, and that was with Gagne and Gartner. They're a year older and not in the good up-and-coming way, and other than Berezin, there isn't exactly a youth movement coming up through the pipeline. Bob's right. Barring something miraculous, it's going to get worse. Maybe a coach can be that something miraculous. The Leafs need a new one with Nick Beverley running back upstairs after his interim run. Who Toronto really wants is Mark Crawford, the defensive demon responsible for the powerhouse Avalanche. The problem is, he's signed in Colorado, and despite wanting to leave, he's not going anywhere. The Leafs settle on Rangers assistant Mike Murphy to take over behind their bench. Well, maybe. Hold on. Crawford really wants out of Colorado, and the Leafs have a yellow bill attached to a fishing pole they're dangling over Denver. But 2 a.m. is fast approaching at the Maple Leafs coaching bar, and Cliff, despite buying drinks for him all night, hasn't been able to pick up Mark Crawford. It's time to settle. After weeks of Mike Murphy as the second choice, Mike Murphy is now the man for the job. Murphy, one of Pat Burns' assistants in Toronto prior to being poached by the even wealthier Rangers ahead of the 1995 season, left his family behind in the Toronto burbs to commute to the Rangers gig, so he's ecstatic to return. Murphy is a much softer personality than Burns, who, for the record, is very happy for his former assistant. The new guy is more of a player's coach than a hardline motivator. Maybe that'll get the seemingly bored veterans going. Free agency comes with some postulation surrounding Ontario native Wayne Gretzky coming home. Toronto talks to him, but the $4 million deal he signs in New York was never realistic for the cost-cutting Leafs. Toronto adds solely depth pieces in free agency, the most interesting of which being Daniel Marois, a guy who twice scored 30 goals with the Leafs pre-Gilmour. But though he's just 28, he's likely cooked. Saying this once again, the Leafs got worse. The rest of the West got better after a down 1996 for the conference. Toronto doesn't have their first-round pick. Are they trying to bottom out? If they are, it's the ultimate punt on a year where you still have Sundin, Gilmour, and Wendell Clark. I don't really understand what the goal is. I guess it's just wait and see. Maybe we're better than you think, and if we aren't, well, there's nothing we can really do about it. In the Toronto Star's Leafs preview published October 3rd, 2 days before opening night, Paul Hunter warns fans that this is likely going to be ugly. Crucially, the Leafs are slow. As a refresher, let's run through the Leafs quickly with some of Hunter's blurbs, and we'll do it in tier list form. Star tier: Mats Sundin, Doug Gilmour, and Felix Potvin. One is on the way up, one is on the way down, and one is possibly doing either. Sundin starred during the '96 World Cup and looks better than ever. Gilmour was strong in the playoffs and postseason, but is getting older. And Felix is maybe a franchise goalie behind a good team, but who knows how he'll do for this team. Hopeful secondary contributors tier: Sergei Berezin, Wendell Clark, and Kirk Muller up front, Dmitry Yushkevich and Matthew Schneider on the back end. All of these guys, except maybe Berezin, have a proven track record as meaningful top-of-the-lineup contributors. The Leafs also think that all of them have a bit more to give compared to last season, particularly Matthew Schneider, who is seen as the team's potential number one defenseman. Old defensemen that can still play tier: Larry Murphy, Dave Ellett, and Jamie McCown. They're all slow as mud, but they're not bad. Murphy in particular still has some offensive flair, though his defense has mostly gone down the tubes. Young guys tier: Todd Warner, Brandon Convery, and Freddie Modine at forward, rookie Jeff Ware on defense. All these guys will get a shot at playing significant minutes for the Leafs this season. They are the few remaining good prospects in the Leafs system that weren't just drafted. The punchers tier: Ty Domi, Nick Kyprios, Scott Pearson. They bring very little to the table offensively, but they can hit and fight. Jamie Baker tier: Jamie Baker. He's a fine 3C. Just guys tier: Mike Craig and Kelly Fairchild up front, Rob Zettler, Matt Martin, and Jamie Heward on D, Don Beaupre as backup goalie. As non-derogatorily as I can state it, these are plugs. They have some degree of promise, but they aren't likely NHL players beyond bottom six, bottom pairing roles, as much as the Leafs seem to love Mike Craig. They're replacement level contributors. Now, the Leafs will play plenty more players that they call up this season, and I'll let you know and introduce them if they do anything cool. I don't think I'll be doing much introducing. Opening night is the Potvin show as he stops 29 of 30 Ducks shots in a 4-1 Leafs win. I mean, the Ducks didn't have Paul Kariya, but it's still a great win. Get the first win under Murphy. First win's always the hardest. Realistically, this team only has to finish .500 to make the playoffs. I mean, that's all they're really trying to do. Then they lose 5 in a row. It turns out the second win is harder than the first. That streak includes a couple gnarly games from Felix, but the Leafs just cannot score. Berezin is cold as ice while Mike Gartner lights it up in the desert. The Leafs have to find an answer and fast. They actually do.
Sundin outbattled Yasperdan. Comes right in on goal. It scores!
Sundin puts together his most dominant stretch yet as the Leafs, scoring 7 goals and 14 points as the Leafs go on a 6-1 run. Things snapped into place for Berezin too, and Doug Gilmour still has plenty of offensive punch. Mike Craig is even lighting it up with 5 goals already. He's well on his way to breaking his Leafs career high of 8. Now it's 7-6 after their rancid start. There is a legitimate path for this team to be fine. They have some firepower. I think they've realized the defense is subpar, but with Schneider and Yuskevich carrying most of the load, it's respectable enough. Felix will be good sometimes and bad others, but he's rarely going to drag you down. I mean, they beat Detroit. After alternating a loss and a win to continue hovering around 500, the Leafs head for an unassuming game in Philadelphia. The Flyers are mean and quite good. They're big, they can score, they can hit, even their stars Eric Lindros and John LeClair, the former of whom is injured for this meeting. So it's no surprise when Kyprios and Flyers pugilist Scott Daniels throw down early in the first, getting Kyprios tossed from the game for a perceived eye gouge. The game plays out somewhat plainly after the fight, though, until what I believe to be an inciting moment. Late in the third, with the Leafs down 1, Muller brushes against Ron Hextall, who sells it like Kirk punched him in the liver. The Flyers score on the ensuing power play, and that infuriates the Leafs. Doug Gilmour, who I should emphasize is not exactly a clean player, starts cracking people. Namely Flyers interim captain, the similarly nasty Rod Brind'Amour. They commence yapping. Off the ice, Doug obliterates his stick on the glass between the two benches. He's pissed. With about 10 seconds left, Gilmour hacks Brind'Amour again. An especially long yap sesh follows. Gilmour stays on for the next shift, as does Brind'Amour. Though as Rod is taking the faceoff against Sundin, the combatants aren't lined up opposite each other. The Leafs pull off Wendell and put Domi on the ice. The Flyers answer by sending out Scott Daniels. Doug is opposite the hulking Dan Kordic, who would gladly beat the much smaller Leafs captain up, but they aren't fighting. But somebody's gotta fight here. Domi and Daniels throw down. The pair are seen off the ice with Domi named winner. Murphy, seeing where this is headed, pulls his stars off the ice. He puts out a fairly non-controversial group: Muller, Baker, Schneider, Larry Murphy, and Wendell just in case anything untoward goes down. The Flyers leave their bruisers on the ice while subbing in the pugnacious Daniel LaCroix. But the draw goes off without a hitch and the puck rolls back to Murphy, who winds up to fire it down the ice to end the game. LaCroix runs him. Wendell, it's your time to shine. Toronto's favorite Saskatchewanian beats LaCroix to a pulp, and holy shit, here comes Hextall. He's gonna kill Felix. He's gonna kill him dead. I don't know if I can handle the Beaup Renaissance. Hextall is the meanest goalie in the league, maybe the meanest goalie ever. He went after Chris Chelios. He went after Craig friggin' Berube. He's a terror. Plus, he has a few inches and a few pounds on poor Felix. This has the potential to be ugly. For Ron Hextall.
I know Felix doesn't think this is a good idea.
What is this all about?
But Felix is doing all right against the bigger Hextall.
Good grief.
A bloodied Hextall skates by the Leafs bench, now populated by a half-dressed Ty Domi, who emerged from the locker room to point and laugh. The Flyers goalie flips him off. It's a loss for the Leafs on the scoreboard, but sometimes, even if you can't win the war, winning a couple battles feels pretty good. Not often does a loss set a great tone for the rest of the season, but giving Hextall the crimson mask while Wendell beats another dude senseless? Man, that's pretty great. The vibes are booming. The Leafs lose 12 of their next 16 games. Remember, there's no loser point. There are ties. These are true, honest losses. It's time to admit the obvious. This is a bad hockey team. One thing to point to as the key reason why this team crumbled from mediocre to horrific is the suspension then injury of Matthew Schneider. The Leafs' only defenseman that can play offense, defense, and skate first elbows Paul Kariya in the head and is banned 3 games as a result, then he pulls his groin a week later in Detroit. At first, the injury seems like nothing, but issues with his groin will cost him most of the rest of the season. Mike Murphy is playing Sundin, Gilmour, and Clark together a lot to get any offense at all, but without those guys on the ice, the Leafs are getting their brains beaten in. Sergei Berezin and Kirk Muller aren't bad, but are they particularly good? But they aren't the targets of the Leafs fans' ire, nor are the plethora of cardio merchants that make up most of the lineup. No, there's one guy that the fan base loathes more than anyone else. Larry Murphy. The Hall of Fame-bound veteran gets drowned in boos every time he touches the puck at Maple Leaf Gardens.
To the side of the net, Potvin stops it for Murphy. And it's sad to see Larry Murphy's had such a great career. Hall of Fame numbers, yeah. But it's just, he's a slower player on a slow team.
Murphy's defense isn't incredible, his mobility isn't what it used to be, and he isn't an offensive juggernaut anymore. He is extremely well compensated. It's a recipe for loathing. But he does not deserve this. Jim Proudfoot absolutely nails his analysis on the topic in his Toronto Star column. It's short, so I'm just going to read the whole thing, because he puts everything more artfully than I could. To hear the loudmouths at Maple Leaf Gardens, you'd think Larry Murphy was the worst player currently clad in blue and white silks, or the only one performing badly. Actually, there are bunglers and worse malingerers up and down the roster. Yet, it's Murphy the Gardens crowd singles out. The chorus of catcalls begins the instant he touches the puck, and there's never an exception, never a let-up. These Toronto spectators are often described as knowledgeable. That's their reputation around the National Hockey League. But apparently, they can't detect the frequent failures of Murphy's colleagues. The truth is, most of these noisy critics are simply dealing themselves into something they imagine to be a clever trend. They're just copycats. This is guaranteed. Nobody acquainted with Murphy would treat him this way. Few finer individuals have earned a living in the NHL. He is thoroughly admirable. But he'd never be the one to complain about the unfairness of it all. In a way, see, he understands. The fans are entitled to express their mounting anger about the deterioration of the Leafs and the bleakness of the team's future. Such rage needs a focal point. He's it. What the fans are really booing here is the stupidity of a management which would acquire a defenseman like Murphy in his declining years, assign him to a pivotal role, and then grant him an annual salary of $2.35 million. He symbolizes one of the things most seriously wrong with the Leafs: overpaying aging athletes to carry out duties for which they're no longer suited. So while struggling amid the multitude's cries of resentment, Murphy is merely the luckless surrogate for general manager Cliff Fletcher, the real culprit. Let the silver fox appear at center ice. He'd bring the house down. Larry Murphy is not the disease. The guy is just a symptom. This is on Cliff Fletcher. And this is not me saying, oh, see, Toronto fans treat their players like crap. They're a passionate fan base. There's nothing wrong with that. But when management puts a guy into the crosshairs in a position he is no longer equipped for and just lets him be lambasted, that sucks. We need to keep moving forward because, as you can tell, there isn't much joy here. There's no joy in this season at all. The Leafs don't get any better. Sundin is cooking. Most everyone else is serving their dishes raw. As the trade deadline approaches, the Leafs are very clear sellers. Larry Murphy is an obvious candidate to get out of town, especially if the Leafs eat some of his salary. The Devils seem to be interested dangling veteran blue liner Sean Chambers, which wouldn't make much sense, or hard-nosed young defender Jason Smith, which actually would make a lot of sense. The Devils add a veteran contributor, and the Leafs shed some salary and get younger. I mean, that tracks for me. As the Leafs continue to suck eggs, I'm not sure how much longer Doug can take this. It's Doug and Sundin dragging this carcass of a team forward, and Gilmour is starting to visibly lose it as the team sits at 17-24-0 midway through the season. When Mike Craig took a major penalty and blew a game against Vancouver, Gilmour reamed out his teammates on the bench. Surely he qualified the reaming to the media as frustration in the heat of the moment, right? No. If the guys don't want to work hard, then they shouldn't put on the jersey, and I don't care what they think of me for saying that, Gilmour had said. I'm getting tired of this. I'm the captain, and I'm feeling the heat. This is my team. I want to remain a Toronto Maple Leaf, but if things go wrong, then I'm the first to go. Brother, things have already gone wrong. There's a lot of hand-waving. Well, what are they going to do, trade Doug? Really? It might not be Toronto's choice. Gilmour hates losing. It's what makes him special. And though he'd prefer to help resurrect the Leafs, if this team doesn't improve, he'll leave. February of 1996 is one of the more difficult months in the Leafs' history. As the team spirals, the Gilmour trade theories turn into rumors, and from rumors into reports. He's likely headed out the door. More serious and largely beyond the scope of this video is the Maple Leaf Gardens sex abuse scandal. None of the current management group is involved, but they're handling the PR crisis horrifically. Finally, it happens. Doug Gilmour is traded alongside Dave Ellett and a draft pick to New Jersey. Gilmour was done. Despite saying he wanted to stay, he didn't really. Not with a team like this. He was borderline petulant, not just fighting with teammates, but with team staff. His play was great, and many of his teammates sucked. But Damian Cox points out in his reaction column that it would have been nice for the captain to ever take any sort of personal accountability. He was checked out. The Leafs now don't have a captain, but it really felt like they'd been without one for months. This is not to shank Doug on his way out the door. He gave this team every iota of his being. But it was time. This was the right move. Poor Dave Ellett just doesn't have the juice anymore, but it's still sad to see him go. The 93 and 94 Leafs are officially dead. It's time to move forward. Moving forward with the Leafs is a sizable crop of young talent acquired from the Devils. Jason Smith, who I mentioned earlier, is a very capable 23-year-old middle-pairing defenseman with a lot of bite to his game. Steve Sullivan is a tiny but ultra-skilled 22-year-old scoring winger, and Alan McCauley, probably the guy with the highest ceiling in the trade, is a 19-year-old OHL player who's been putting up massive numbers with the Ottawa 67s. This trade, as much as it hurts, is a step in the right direction. Getting players over picks, too, allows the Leafs to rebuild around Sundin with the Swede still in his prime. This is a good move. I wouldn't say the Leafs improve after the Gilmour trade, but they get better results. Sullivan and Smith look like genuine pieces of the future already. So does Todd Warner, who seems to be breaking out. Without the specter of Doug's disappointment, there's an ease amongst the team. There's also ease from some players because they know, come deadline day, they're on the fastest plane out of town to a contender. Team success is about to not be Kirk Muller's problem anymore. Basically every name on the roster is in play, including Potvin. Felix hasn't had the best season, but the Leafs' defense has been so awful, who would've? Potvin is still held in high esteem around the league, and the Leafs seem to be eyeing either Mark Recchi in Montreal or, hilariously, Michael Renberg in Philadelphia as potential targets in a swap for their goalie. Felix going to Philadelphia and taking Ron Hextall's job after kicking his ass would be very funny. With young upstart Marcel Cousino proving to be a solid NHL goalie in a backup role, and the Leafs definitely not going anywhere next season regardless of their goaltending, why not trade Potvin? I mean, don't just move him, but if you can get fair value, do it. Amid all the trade talk, the Leafs somewhat quietly add another future, signing college free agent Bowling Green star Mike Johnson for a sizable amount of money. Worth a shot, he'll join the big club right from the drop. Deadline day sees the Leafs as one of the league's only sellers, theoretically with a lot of leverage. They send off Muller to Florida for good but not great prospect Jason Potolan. Potolan has the potential to be a mean second-line scoring winger. Toronto reportedly turns down a first for Wendell, and Cliff Fletcher literally says, draft schmaft. Then, the most interesting move of the day. The Leafs send out Larry Murphy to Detroit for nothing. Oh, sorry. The Leafs pay to send out Larry Murphy to Detroit for nothing. Now, to be fair, Larry Murphy has a no-trade clause. He could veto any move. But, did you run any others past him? Like 3 weeks ago, the Devils were offering Jason Smith, and now you're hitting Detroit with, take my defenseman, please. The guy is getting booed every night, but you really didn't think he'd have waived for anyone other than the best team in the league that's run by his former coach. I don't believe you. Or at the very least, I don't believe you tried. You pay to get rid of a player that, despite his contract, is still a net positive. That doesn't work for me, Chief. Is this an ultimate sign of respect from Fletcher? Larry, we're going to put you in the best situation humanly possible with the possibility that we'll look like huge morons. Or some weird attempt at embarrassment. See, you loser, we hate you so much that you're worth nothing to anyone. Less than nothing to us. Kick rocks. The only way that this trade could even remotely make sense from a hockey standpoint is if Murphy absolutely refused to waive his no-trade for anyone else. And I just do not see how that would have been the case. But even if it was, just keep him. It looks like Jeff Ware sucks anyway. You don't have any young guys to put back there. So it's a pure salary dump. Okay, fine. You're resetting to get free agents in the summer at more efficient prices. I guess that is possible. But if that's the case, if that's what you're doing, then why the hell did you keep Wendell? He makes a bunch of money, and you'd have at least gotten something for him. Oh, I know why. The fans like Wendell, and they don't like Murphy. You can't just operate off the will of the fans, Cliff. That makes you a rube. The trade sucks. The Leafs continue to lose post-deadline as Murphy scores in his debut with the Red Wings, quickly finding his home on their top pairing next to Nicholas Lidstrom. Oh, that's crazy. I was sure the Leafs would go undefeated with Murphy gone. Like I said, I don't blame the fans, but I'm sure there are some talk radio goofs that should feel some guilt for riling up a frustrated fan base and pointing them at one dude, who again was perfectly fine with the Leafs. No, actually, he made a mistake against the Jets, and if you really think about it, shut up, dude. This shit really pisses me off, man. The Leafs suck. It all sucks. It's gonna suck next year, too. Can we skip to the end of the season? The last 11 games of the season are more of what we've come to expect. In increased roles, Sullivan and Berezin play well, with the latter finishing with 25 goals, and Sundin continues what has been a terrific season among the dregs. Ultimately, the Leafs finish 30, 44, and 8, fourth from the bottom in the league, ahead of only the goalieless Bruins, Todd Gill captain Sharks, and the Rob Blake is really trying here Kings. The Red Wings, with Larry Murphy on their top pair, matching up against the Legion of Doom, sweep the Flyers to win the Stanley Cup. Cliff Fletcher, who had declared back in 1996, "What are they going to do? Fire me," is fired. To add more structure within the organization, the Leafs hire longtime arch-rival and Hall of Fame goaltender Ken Dryden as team president. He's a thoughtful, smart guy. A good person to oversee the franchise and put some separation between ownership and whoever the next GM will be. Apparently, ownership had been planning on firing Fletcher for a while, but still let him run the trade deadline. For fun, I guess. And now, they're going to let interim GM Bill Waters run the draft. That seems insane to me, as the Leafs should be picking top 5. Oh, right! They don't pick until the 3rd round. The Islanders have the Leafs' number 4 pick in a draft that would have landed Toronto one of Patrick Marleau, Olli Jokinen, or Roberto Luongo, assuming elite center Joe Thornton goes number 1. Cool. Also, Waters is making trades. He sends mid-tier prospect Mike Lankshire for Florida defenseman Per Gustafsson. Given the Leafs already picked up random defenseman Craig Wolanin back in January for a third, which I didn't mention because who cares, it seems strange to just feed more futures into the shredder for another dude in his late 20s. Gustafsson has some juice offensively. He's probably a bottom-pairing power play specialist, which fills a small need. It's not the worst trade. It's just weird. Roberto Luongo is the man taken by the Islanders with the Wendell Clark trade pick. If you're watching this sometime after 1997, have you heard of that gentleman? The top picks in Toronto's possession are 57, which they use on Boston College winger Jeff Farkas, and 84, with which they select grinding center Adam Mayer. Free agency is more exciting as the Leafs, still without a permanent GM, try to retool on the fly. While Mike Craig and Jamie Heward head out the door, Toronto signs solid second-line winger Derek King, puncher Chris King, Middle Six Reclamation Project Igor Korolev, prospect Kevin Adams, and capable backup Glenn Healy. None of these are bad signings, but what's the point? All these guys do, unless you're really high on Kevin Adams, is make the Leafs slightly less bad. They still aren't good. Hey, but these guys are signed beyond next season. You have to have some warm bodies on the team. Glenn Healy is maybe the most compelling signing insofar as it allows the Leafs to possibly move Potvin and go with Healy and Cosino in net. The Leafs have also resolved their big to-do with the city of Toronto and the Raptors regarding a new arena, deciding finally to move into the currently being constructed Air Canada Centre and share it with the NBA team. While the minutiae and pettiness of the actual argument is not exactly interesting to me, it is sad to see the Leafs moving out of the final remaining Original Six building. Is anyone at all excited for this season? Who are you excited to see on this team? Thanks mostly to the Doug Gilmour trade, they have some good young players, but I don't think any of the under 23 guys on this team are going to take some massive step into stardom. It's Sundin, and I guess the next best player after him is Matthew Schneider. In August, Dryden finally finds the best man for the GM job by looking in the mirror. Yes, the new Maple Leafs general manager is Ken Dryden, which I'm sure gave some Quebecois gentleman an aneurysm. The gist you get is that Dryden spent most of the summer trying to lure his former teammate, Stars GM Bob Gainey, over to Toronto. When that wasn't successful, Dryden shrugged and hired himself. You can assume that he was the puppet master through all of Waters' moves over the summer, which were inoffensive, so Dryden should do a fine job. Last order of business, the Leafs need a new captain. They name Mats Sundin, choosing him over Wendell Clark, which I'm sure people were really chill about. Time for opening night. Alan McCauley made the roster out of camp. He probably projects as a middle six, two-way center in the long term. That's nice. In the Toronto Star's preview, columnist Dave Perkins declares, Leafs are better off if they remain bad, which is correct. Jim Proudfoot is, for some reason, cautiously optimistic. I have a feeling that mentality won't last long. The Leafs get whomped by the Capitals 4-1 right off the drop. In case anyone like my buddy Jim thought this team would be any good, their first 10 games will put that idea to bed. Toronto goes 3-6-1 out of the gate. Their only victories come in the form of 2 wins over the awful Flames and 1 win over, of all people, Detroit. This team beats Detroit a boggling amount for the talent disparity. Detroit starts 1997 10-1-2, with their only loss coming against the Leafs. I really don't know. The key difference between this team and the last 3 years' squads, this team's effort is never questioned. These guys are out there giving it everything they have. I mean, they aren't good, but they're trying. I thought this season would be all doom and gloom, but there is something here. They go over 500 in their next 10. Hey, they're improving. They beat really crappy teams when they face them, putting them in the merely crappy tier. Mike Johnson seems to have some juice. He has some potential as a top 6 scoring forward. Freddie Modine has started to score a little with his cannon shot. This is a rebuilding year. It's fine that they lose, and yeah, I wish there were more people on the way in the pipeline, but it really feels like this team has parts that will be here when they're good again. Is most of that Mats Sundin? Probably, but you have to start somewhere. As the season progresses, there is more sleepwalking from the players. They're 13, 21, and 7 by game 41. They're basically exactly as bad as they were last year, which is impressive because last year's team had much better players. Either that, or this team is telling us just how pathetic last year's squad was. They do need to sell at the trade deadline though, because unlike last year, there are a bunch of bad teams. The Leafs need to get worse. They don't achieve that by adding once great, currently serviceable defenseman Jeff Brown. The Leafs' power play has been laughably bad since trading Murphy, and Brown can run a power play. I mean, it's good for the young guy's development to be able to score on the power play at all. It's a sound ad for just a fourth and eating a bunch of salary. Give him some power play minutes, and maybe you can spin him for more at the deadline. Brown logs 27.5 minutes in his first game with the team, and while he doesn't magically improve the Leafs, he's pretty good during his time in Toronto, which is very abbreviated. In the March deadline season, Toronto swaps underperforming prospects with Vancouver, sending out Brandon Convery for Lonnie Bohonos. 10 days later, they fire Per Gustafsson into the sun for the Senators' 8th round pick. On deadline day itself, Mike Kennedy, a guy I definitely remembered they signed, is sent for another 8th. How's that for draft schmaft, Cliff? Jeff Brown is in fact flipped again, this time to the Capitals for Sylvain Cote. They're comparable players, but Cote is a bit older, less injured, and signed for next season. If the Leafs had re-signed Brown, the 4th they sent to Carolina would have become a 3rd. Swapping him out for Cote prevents that. Makes a lot of sense. Finally, and most painfully, Jamie McCown is sent to Detroit for a 4th round pick. McCown is largely cooked, but he can still add something to a team in a small role. But really, I mean, what's he gonna do? Win a Stanley Cup in Detroit like Murphy? Speaking of, Murphy's gonna finish 6th in Norris voting this season, by the way. Just a piece of information I thought folks would want to know, given that the Leafs are still paying him. Despite his name being at the center of nearly every rumor surrounding the team, Felix is still on the squad as the deadline rolls by. The Leafs sold, but did this team get bad enough to get a top 5 pick? Compare them to the Canucks, who shipped out just about everyone who wasn't nailed down. Trevor Linden, Marty Jelena, Kirk McLean, Mike Sillinger, even flipping acquired players like Jeff Sanderson and Sean Burke. That's how you get bad. Even still, nobody's catching the truly horrific Lightning, who will finish with a point total in the 40s. Sundin couldn't get the Leafs as low as Lightning point leader Paul Easbear could get his Bolts. In their final 12 games following the deadline, the Leafs, for some reason, go 6-6. They played just well enough to hop over the Canucks, Flames, and even the Rangers to finish 7th from the bottom. With the expansion Nashville Predators joining the league, the Leafs will pick 8th. Well, you know what? It's nice to see the team give a crap and win some games. The 1998 draft, truthfully, doesn't look all too great beyond consensus number 1 Vinny LeCavalier. The Leafs will get who they get. While the Leafs wait to draft, Larry Murphy, this time joined by Jamie McCown, lifts yet another cup for Detroit. Neat. Just a few days before the draft, the Leafs relieve Mike Murphy of his duties as head coach, buying out the last year of his contract. Murphy seemed like a nice guy, but he was in over his head and, frankly, almost ready to leave. The Toronto native handles his firing with grace, stating, "It doesn't do any good to be bitter and ticked off. People who are looking to hire Mike Murphy will say, he's not a whiner. He's not a very good coach, but he's not a whiner anyways." Not that Mike had much of a chance, as he spent the whole season begging for players that were good at hockey, but the Leafs need someone who will get more out of their young talents like Steve Sullivan, Sergei Berezin, and Alan McCauley, all of whom had mediocre to bad seasons in '98. But regardless, the Leafs are still on a trajectory toward just missing the playoffs at best. It's not like they're going to get one guy who will magically turn the franchise around and pull them out of the pits of despair. They're going to get 2. A coach and a goalie. Pat Quinn and Curtis Joseph are going to turn this car around.
The Stanley Cup playoffs, the road team has won 7 of the 9. As Joseph went down on the ice there. Chance in front.